This is a walkthrough for 12-3 Work Together. We are page 286 of your textbook. We are posting from a sales journal to an accounts receivable ledger. And the book says the following partial journal page for Graphics Inc. is given in working papers. Page 10 of the sales journal. Here's sales journal, page 10. Also given in the working papers is one blank accounts receivable ledger account form. Here's our blank accounts receivable ledger account form. Your instructor, that is actually still me, will guide you through the following examples. Now, a couple things that I want to point out, because I know this was a section that I had you guys read on your own and take notes on. How can we tell the difference between an accounts payable account ledger form and an accounts receivable accounts ledger form? Well, an accounts payable, it's going to say vendor and vendor number. And accounts receivable, it's going to be customer and customer number, because most likely it's going to be our customers, the people who buy things from us, that owe us money. And of course, it's going to be the vendors are going to be the people that we owe money to. So something else to pay attention to is that in the accounts payable ledger form, this was a credit balance because the normal balance of accounts payable account is a credit. And if you have a negative, it means that for some reason you owe somebody a negative amount of money, which, as we discussed in class, doesn't make sense. If you owe somebody $50, you owe somebody $50. And so for the accounts receivable account form, for the accounts receivable ledger account form, and that's a lot of words, I know, this column will have a debit balance because accounts receivable is an asset account and it has a normal balance of a debit. So people will only owe you a debit amount of money. They'll only owe you a positive amount of money, not a negative amount of money. So those are two things you can look at to say, okay, which form am I looking at? Which ledger is this in? And remember, this is a subsidiary ledger, so this is an accounts receivable ledger. So we're going to start with number 3, and it says, start a new page for an accounts receivable ledger account from Maria Farrell. The account number is 120, and the balance for October 1 of the current year is $212. How do we start a new form? For a new customer? Well, we write the customer's name, and it was Maria Farrell, and we write our customer number. The customer number is 120. This tells us that this is for the accounts receivable, right? It's an asset. And then the 20 is the actual customer number. So, but the entire one is 120. We put our date, and I think I used 2013 and 14 for 12-1 and 12-2. So I'm just going to go with 2013 because 2014 October hasn't happened yet. I need to go in and click my wrap text. Which is right here, right? It'll pop up and say wrap text. I click this one. And also I'm using Word 2007 at home, so it may be a little bit different at school. You guys are using 2010. We need to put in our balance. The balance for October 1 of the current year is $212. So we need to put in the day, which is 1. We put in the words balance. And somebody asked me why we don't put in carried forward or brought forward. I don't know what the context is for this book in particular, if they're, pulling, if they closed out a ledger, it was completely full, so they're starting a new ledger. I don't know what their context is, but they're just telling us this was the balance on this date. And it may be that they don't want to go back and show you all the previous transactions. So we put balance just so we know that this was not a transaction. We didn't forget something. This is just the balance on that date. So we're going to have a post draft of a check mark, right? And that tells us that this didn't come from a journal. Like I said, this may have come from a prior page. It came from the book in particular. So we're going to go insert, symbol, on my wingdings, check mark, insert. All right, so close. We had a debit balance of $212. Okay, does this look right? It looks right to me. Next one is number 4. It says, post the accounts receivable debit entry on line 5 of the sales journal to the accounts receivable account for Maria Farrell. Save your work to complete work together on page 302. And if you look down here, it says the sales journal is used to complete 12-6 work together. Okay, so we want to post this journal entry right here. And if you recall from chapter 11, in the sales journal, our accounts receivable has a dedicated column. It's accounts receivable debit, right? So that's what we want to post is our accounts receivable debit amount. So we're going to look in this column right here. And remember, all that goes in the sales journal are sales on account. So Maria Farrell, this is Maria Farrell's account. It was sales invoice number 84, which is irrelevant, right? We don't put that anywhere in here, do we? But we might want the date. It was on the 20th of October. Our post ref, we're going to put the page number of the journal that it came from, right? So it came from our sales journal, so we're going to put S, page 10. It was a debit for $576.64. And so now we need to total our new balance. So we had a debit, two debits, add them together. We have $788.64. And of course, the very last step is that we now have to go back to the journal and put the customer number right here in the post ref column of the journal. So that's going to be 120. And so we've completed the two parts of work together for 12-3, and it is time to move on to 12-3 on your own.